Hi Forex traders, this is Chris with a video on the US dollar zigzag potential on this 25th of May, and where we take a look at the euro dollar, pound dollar, dollar yen and Aussie. But first of all, be aware that this video is intended for a global audience and may not be suitable for everyone. Please find out more information and details on admiralmarketsglobal.com, select your country of residence and contact the appropriate entity. Also, trading for exchange is considered high risk and may not be suitable for everyone. Please seek the advice of an independent financial advisor for more information on that. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not advice, and by continuing watching this webinar, or video I should say, you agree with the disclaimer. First of all, I do want to mention that there are public holidays on this Monday the 25th of May in many countries like the US and Great Britain, so trading could start off with a slow start this week. Looking at the dollar yen, as we have the last week of May of trading, we see a pretty big breakout candle here on the dollar yen weekly chart, towering above the resistance trendline green and the resistance spot at 120.25 in magenta, and you can see that this break is looking pretty strong with a good power. So when I look at the triangle on the daily chart, we talked about it last week, the potential for the triangle to be completed. That is indeed what happened here. A, B, C, D, E, finish the triangle. So anyone who took longs upon the triangle break or completion or the break are doing very well at the moment. For this particular situation, I'm actually looking for a bit of a retracement, perhaps to the 38.2 fib on the daily chart here, like this, back to 120.67 to look for a bounce at 38.2 fib for further continuation. We are getting pretty close to a top here at 121.80, so that level could still cause price to make a retracement, and that's what I'll be waiting for, to find buyers at 38.2 fib or the 50 fib basically for upside continuation on this dollar yen breakout, or bullish breakout to be precise. With regard to the AUD USD, last week I was saying we could see some bearish retracement perhaps before we bounce off support. We did see that bearish retracement actually, and we did bounce off that support, but only for a bit before we continued actually that downside momentum. So the downside definitely pushing pretty far, and we see the dollar gaining some strength. But the question is the dollar indeed up for a major rally, or is this just a temporary rally for a kind of zigzag correction like this, where we see some dollar weakness kick in? All right, now the dollar yen, of course, perhaps is a different story, because the yen could be weakening at the same time as the dollar is strengthening. That could push the dollar yen further than this AUD USD to the downside. So that's something I'm looking at, potential for a bigger consolidation here, a bigger zigzag correction against the Aussie, but also the euro and pound, which we'll review in just a second. So from that point of view, is the AUD USD in a bouncing spot? If I use fibs like this, I can see that there are targets basically nearby. Also, if I use a fib like that, you can see a target nearby. So yes, the Fibonacci targets, in my opinion, are pretty clear. Also, the 78 level is a support level still. Plus, the AUD USD made a sturdy fall without any retracement so far. Those are decent reasons for me to believe that a bounce is possible. But obviously, if you do look at the candles, very bearish, daily and weekly. So a bit more push perhaps to 77.50 wouldn't be strange either, to get a lower low to this week. Looking at the weekly candle, you can see, for instance, that last week was a very strong candle. Typically, the low gets broken, so I wouldn't be surprised if we put a fib from top to bottom like this. That, for instance, the -272 target of that big bearish candle would be a bouncing spot at around that 77.50 level. As I said, 77.40 is the -272 target. So that's where I would be expecting the bounce back up at that 77.50, 77.40. If price doesn't get there soon, it might rally up a bit to the 38.2 or 50 fib of that weekly candle and find downside. Something like this, for instance, a bit retracement, then back down to the -272 target, and then back up for a bigger rally. That's what I would be expecting on the AUD USD for this week. Now be aware that there are webinars coming up this week, weekly FX recap with Nennet. He will share his opinion on the euro, pound and Aussie, and others probably. Then on Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm taking a look at live trading. In fact, in the live webinar on Tuesday, Wednesday morning. Tuesday evening, we have a learning lab webinar. That's an educational focused webinar. And Wednesday, then is going to take a look at writing with Bollinger. So if you're interested in finding 4 critical errors, for instance, take a look at the webinar on Tuesday, but hope to see you in all of these webinars. Alright, let's continue with the Euro Dollar weekly chart, and I see a big bearish candle now engulfing the candle before that, and if I put a fib on that candle, the obviously target for this is the -272 at 108.75, and we already broke last week's low, so looking for intra-week downside to that first target, perhaps even with an overshoot down to the -618 at 107.20. That's what I would be looking for. And at the moment, when looking at this daily chart, and take away this particular fib, you can see that there was a bit of a retracement right in here. We can see that a bit better on the 4-hour chart, and if I look at the 4-hour chart, you can see that that particular zigzag pattern will be completed probably this week. So if I fib the very first zigzag part A, this was the B part that went to the 38.2 fib. So expecting a bit of a bounce at 109.50, which is a temporary -272 target, but wouldn't be surprised if we complete the zigzag at a lower spot at this -61.8, for instance, or even, let's see, at the -1000, but that would be of course an extension. For the moment, -618, looking how far this euro dollar can ride. For the moment, we could see maybe on the lower time frame something like a bear flag today as well, because of the holidays. Wouldn't be surprised to see that, but a break of that bear flag would be a high probability setup to the next target. This is the pound dollar daily chart, and here we're looking at 2 potential zigzags. One zigzag was right in here where we had a rally, a pullback to the 38.2 fib, and then a move up to the -272 target, after which price started to fall, and we had one fall and then a rally, and then looks like again a zigzag prior to after a bullish zigzag. And this bearish zigzag could go, for instance, to the -272 target right here at 153.50, or even the -618 target at 152.25. So looking at that potential, where do we see the confluence? Not too much confluence, but around 151 here is a bottom, plus a many fibs, or even a bit higher around here we see also some potential confluence as well, filling up this gap. There is a potential that this could be a zigzag too, right here, and we see perhaps something like this emerge. So in that regard, I would keep an eye on the 50 fib too, because that's where price already bounced. The 61.8 fib, for instance, the 78.6, all of these fibs for a bullish bounce here could be interesting. So that's what I'm going to be keeping an eye on, the bullish bounce at those fib levels, but also perhaps still a retracement up for more downside, for some continuation of that momentum to the downside. If I put a fib on last week's weekly candle, although it was still an inside candle, it was bearish, then I see that you see -272 target at 153.50, 152.50. Those could be bouncing spots, whereas for upside, whereas bouncing spots for downside could occur logically at any of these particular fib levels, like 156, 155.50, and at 156.30. Well, that wraps up the video for today, the summary of this week's action. Let's see how it continues. Of course, today could be slow, as I said. More of that we'll know tomorrow and on Wednesday, where we take a look at the live environment in the webinar. So I hope to see you in those webinars this week, and wish you all happy hunting. Cheers.